Hello, my name's Eddie. This is Brock. Welcome to Two Goons Talking Politics, episode 3. Today we're talking about Israel and Gaza fights for freedom. Hello and welcome to Two Goons Talk About Politics, episode 3. Today we're talking about Israel because Brock had to give a presentation on Israel for his online Zoom class in the middle of this dumb pandemic. And I told him to watch Abby Martin's Gaza Fights for Freedom. I hadn't researched Israel in like probably 2 years, but I remember Abby Martin had a lot of the best stuff on it. So he watched that, learned all the history of the region, and yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. That movie and the current situation and some of the history. So I'll let Brock go.
Yeah, admittedly, I kind of started the project not interested, and I was going to kind of blow it off, and then I watched that Abby Martin film, and I ended up doing hours of research because it was so interesting. So essentially, in 1916, anything about history, Jews were not treated well, and that was no exception. There was like mass mob killings of Jews everywhere, so something called the Zionist movement started, which was essentially just the belief that Israel or Jewish people needed one land full of only Jews, no one else. From 1947 to present day, there's just a really famous map that shows the country of Palestine, full, completely Palestinian owned until today, when there's only it's speckled with spots where the Palestinian people live. And you hear about this conflict in the U.S. media, and all you hear is oh, the Hamas is being evil, throwing rockets at Israel, they're so bad. But then you never hear the other side of the story of you have this entire country of people that now is condensed to this looks like less than 30% of the landmass that they usually had. And it's what happened to all those people? Well, Abby Martin broke it down in not Gaza Fights for Freedom, but a different video where it's just the entire history of it and a bunch of mass rapings, killings. Just essentially the Zionist movement was trying to push Palestinians out and make Israel completely their own. Many of their leaders were cited as saying that. So really evil, but no one knows any of that history because all we talk about is Hamas is evil, Israel needs to do what it can to defend itself.
Yeah, and they say, a lot of people be like, it's not Palestine, it's Hamas. But it's how do you think Hamas formed? It's because Palestine's getting destroyed. You think Hamas just came out of nowhere? No, there's a group of violent militants, because look at that map. Look what's happened to the Palestinian, the amount of land that they own. And Israel's funded by the U.S., the sole superpower in the world. For no reason, we're just dumping millions of dollars into the Israeli military, and then they're slowly closing down on Gaza, and then there's this one group of people who's no, we're gonna fight back and launch rockets back at you guys, and we're nope, that's an evil terrorist group, that's why we're there. It's just absurd.
Yeah, and that brings up the point of we're not saying terrorism's good, but it's okay, what are the conditions that make terrorism rise? What is the conditions that make the Taliban, all these organizations arise? It's people getting oppressed, and then it's so easy to take power when you have people who are just getting completely screwed and have no human rights.
Yeah, the more you destabilize the region, we've seen this over and over again in the Middle East. When you destabilize the region, terror groups rise up. That's why we're still in Iraq. That's why we're still in Afghanistan. We took out Saddam Hussein in Iraq. ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all the other Islamic extremist groups are now fighting for power in that area. Saddam was the one holding them at bay. Same type of thing here. You give Israel all this power and you start destroying the Palestinian people. Yeah, some of them are going to start fighting back at you. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the most powerful part of this documentary was that it was in the Middle East, you just hear about oh, it's all these people that believe this crazy religion. They want everyone to be Muslim in the world. And it's no, she really goes in and humanizes them and interviews them. And these people are just, they're just as normal as you and me, normal people wanting to live, but they're constantly living in fear of the Israeli government. Most of their cities are on have curfews and intense police occupation. It's just a horrible way to live. And it shows
the West Bank's an open air prison, essentially.
Exactly, Gaza Strip, same thing. But essentially, yeah, we hear that she shows Israeli snipers just taking out children, medics, it doesn't matter. There is just absolute proof of these heinous war crimes. But
journalists.
Yeah, journalists, people that you know, the whatever convention, UN convention.
Yeah.
I don't know the name, my bad, but yeah, it's completely illegal, complete war crime, but we just allow it to happen. Our media, you know, we portray it like it's fine. Israel's doing what they can to protect themselves, and even some people will say they're holding restraint, you know, shooting these medics.
This is kind of an anecdote, but Sacha Baron Cohen's show, you ever watch that? This is America. He goes up to a bunch of politicians or like Republican pundits, and he's like pretending to be Israeli. He's like, I'm going to give you an award for supporting Israel. And afterwards, he's like, can you do this one thing? It's something we're doing in Israel. Like, we've started arming kindergartners with like grenade launchers and stuff and like training them. And then he's like, can you pitch an ad like for doing that in America? And then he has like a super long clip of people, of these Republican politicians who he got to be like, in just a week of training, you can turn your first grader into a first grenader. That's literally what Joe Walsh says, who's like a Republican who ran against Trump for president this year.
That's Borat?
It's, This is America. He did a show.
The Sacha Baron Cohen? That's that guy,
yeah,
Borat?
the
That's
Borat
fucking
guy.
awesome.
It's so funny, but yeah. I don't know. It just shows how little the politicians are thinking, and it's just the fact that, you know, Israel's going to give our corporations access to that area more so than Palestine. So we act like we want a two-state solution, but we want a one-state solution. We are basically Zionists in this country, and the Israeli far-right Zionist movement gets along really, really well with the U.S. because we're also very far-right. But
yeah, that brings up another point actually. When Israel was first starting, there was what's his name? Theodore Herzl was quoted as saying to the Western powers, to the European imperial powers, he was claiming that Israel would be representatives of Western civilization and bring cleanliness, order, and well-established customs to this plague-ridden, blighted corner of the Orient.
jeez.
Yeah, just clearly racist as hell. Clearly saying, hold up, there's another good quote on here. Yeah, so Ben Gurion, the prime minister from 35 to 48, so till right after World War II, we were not just working, we were conquering. We're a company of conquistadors, essentially bragging about the fact that they were conquering land, killing, raping, sending people out. One of the stories that literally like made me shiver was they had one of the towns they were taking over, they had a Palestinian woman, I assume just like tied up, screaming over the loudspeaker into the town, like bloody murder, like just tell them like you better leave. Then they announced you better run. The Jews have nuclear and chemical weapons. They're basically just doing whatever they can to clear out the town. And another Ben Gurion quote, just plain and simple. This was in 39. So from 1920 to 39, the settler population increased from 10 to 30%, and he says, we must expel the Arabs and take their place. So, I mean, it was like, it's not even like, if it was, they had a clear intention of pushing the Palestinians out of their land and taking it over for Jewish people.
And our boy Ben Shapiro also famously tweeted, Israelis love to build, Arabs love to bomb crap and live in sewage. That shows you the mindset of America, the American right about this, and I think it shows like we're so in this. You grow up in this country hearing that Muslim extremism is the most dangerous and horrible thing ever, and of course it is. Like groups like ISIS are horrible, but it's any kind of religious extremism. This is why all sorts of deaths happen because of religion. Like it's this Zionist belief that they have a religious right to this land that leads them to do these things. Maybe it might be the corporate interest, but that's what they tell people. It's this Zionism. And you see that religious extremism can manifest itself in any religion, and it can be used to manipulate people for anything. Except for maybe Buddhism. Are there any Buddhist extremists? Other than that, it's the same, like the Muslim religion is no worse than any of these other religions. There's been just as much death and destruction that's come from Christianity and from Judaism. It's important to point that out, I think, with all the racism against Muslims in this country, is that racism? Xenophobia, I guess, would be a better word.
Just blind ignorance.
Ignorance. Pure ignorance. I mean, what % of Muslim people are are violent or are jihadists in a terrorist group. I saw someone the other day saying that it was like a Trump supporter. He's like, I wish we could. He was talking to a Muslim guy on a video. He's like, I wish we could make the distinction between jihadist and Muslim. And I wish like you guys like what do you expect every Muslim to walk up to and be like, I'm not a jihadist? Or you're being ridiculous. There's a tiny amount of jihadists, and they only exist because we destroyed their regions with bombs. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's kind of the narrative that they're the only religion that has extremists or terrorists, when like Zionism, like they were going into towns and raping and killing women and children. Like it wasn't like, it's not like Islam is an inherently bad religion and all the other ones are good. You know, every religion has good and bad, and it's just not a paradigm you see in the United States.
Yeah, and of course we don't want to say like all Jewish people are like this. Of course not. You know, most Jewish people in America are on the left. They're awesome, and you know, of course the Jewish people are awesome. It's just this far right Zionism that leads to violence, and you saw stuff like the 2 shot 1 kill t-shirts. You see those? There was like a Palestinian woman with like a baby, and there's like a crosshair around her. It says, or no, 1 shot 2 kills. They're selling t-shirts like that. I don't know. It's a tough situation, a lot of violence, and I don't know if you research solutions at all, but it's hard to come up with solutions when the conflict's been going on this long. But I think it's pretty clear we need a 2-state solution where both countries can settle there.
Well, if we're to do anything, it definitely shouldn't be sending Israel $10 million every single day. In 2019, the U.S. said they will give Israel $38 billion over the next 10 years, $3.8 billion per year, $10 million a day. And I mean, that money is being put straight into the weapons that are killing women, children, journalists, medics, all this.
In our own country's crumbling. Our infrastructure gets a grade of D. We have 60,000 people die because they don't have health care, and everybody's leaving school with $80,000 in student debt. And when we ask them to take care of that stuff, it's like, no, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, Israel can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. What the hell? Why does that not... Why, when corporations need a bailout, or when other countries need weapons of war to do genocides, where they don't have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps? It's here, open the treasury. We know why that is. It's because the rich own our government. People are scared of the state. They're scared of the government for good reason. That's because the rich own it. But the key isn't to abolish the state right away, like a lot of silly people think. The key is to have the working class control the state, and then we go, all this money that's being used on offensive wars, all this money that's getting dumped into cruise lines, trillions of dollars, we're using that on people. And the kind of society we would create if we could do that would be insane. But we got to organize to do that, of course, and that's what our next video is about.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, you drank more coffee than me this morning.
Hyped. Let's go.
Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier too, just with exactly just the way we look at people. Abby Martin highlighted a really interesting point when she was interviewing some of the Palestinian citizens, and it's like an overall paradigm shift among a lot of them. I assume this doesn't exist everywhere, but it was just an interesting point of like they kind of changed it from like, you know, fuck the Jews, you know, we're anti-Semitic, to more like, nah, I mean, like, obviously there's cool people over there, but fuck Israel, fuck the people that are shooting us and bombing us, you know. So I mean, there are definitely people that are seeing through the charade.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old thing. You have more in common with the working class of your enemy than you do with the government in your own country, and that's true for Palestinians and Israeli workers and regular people. But it's the government that's far-right Zionist Israeli government that's corporate control. It's our government that's corporate controlled, that wants access to those markets in Israel. So we're funding the crap out of Israel. When in reality, we have more in common with the working people of Palestine and Israel than we do with our government, of course. Like, we're all getting screwed the same way.
Yeah, there was another anecdotal story. There was an Israeli family whose their son was kidnapped and like brutally killed by Hamas, and she was interviewing this Palestinian guy, and so this family they came to this guy's house, and they just like had coffee and talked, and like instead of fighting, they just found a commonality in this struggle. And it was really an incredible story of just like, you know, starting to see that like the difference between Israel versus Palestine and when it really is like, you know, the lower classes of each against the powerful structures. Which another point about Israel obviously is that it's not like they all hate Palestinians or anything. She did a lot of good work showing people who were against all the militarism going on, people who are like defecting from the army and speaking out against it. So that was really cool to see, because in Israel everyone is required. Females are required 2 years in the military, and males are required 3 years. And a lot of people now are defecting and choosing not to serve, which is like a big risk to them. Like you can be in prison. You really risk your future reputation and chances of employment. So, you know, there are good people on both sides for sure.
Of course. I just want to probably bring up two more things before we call it, but Ilhan Omar earlier was talking about the Israeli lobby, who AIPAC, the people who lobby our politicians to make sure that we continue to fund Israel with, what'd you say, $10 million a day?
$10 million a day.
$10 million a day. And that's not even including what the Israeli lobby spends lobbying U.S. politicians to do this. But anyway, so Ilhan Omar said it's all about the Benjamins, baby. Because she was saying, like, Benjamin, $100 bill, it's all about the money. And Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of Israel. So she was making a joke. And the right and the left in America, the liberal left, like, flipped out on her. This is anti-Semitic. How could you say this? Comparing Jews and money. It's like, that's not what she's doing. She's saying she doesn't want people to be murdered with rockets or living in an open-air prison, or for Palestine to become nothing. The ethnic cleansing of an entire group of people is what she's coming out against. And you have freaking liberals in this country like, oh, how could you use this mean language? No one cares about the words you use when people are being murdered with rockets. Dude, what are your people's priorities? But your priorities are secretly, you like the Israeli lobby, you want to keep doing what corporations want over there, because you live in the empire, and you've lived in this little bubble your entire life, and you have no idea what's going on around the world in America's name with your tax money. So you'd rather freak out about someone using a naughty word you don't like, or a word that you think was too offensive, when she's trying to take one of the only politicians taking a stand against this ethnic cleansing of Palestinians we're funding. Are you kidding me? Liberalism is a brain disease. If you think Ilhan Omar is in the wrong for that, you have been infected with the brain disease that is liberalism, and you care more about words than pregnant women being sniped, and you need to really rethink that. Anything to say on that?
Dropped a lot. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I can think of anything.
The last thing I want to bring up was BDS. So what do you think about BDS? Did you look that up at all? Boycott, divestment, sanctions?
Sounds familiar, maybe.
It's basically it's boycotting certain products, which I think that's products that fund Israel, or products that come from Israel, or maybe, I can't remember exactly what it is, but people like Bernie's even against it. But I think we need to start supporting that. I mean, but also under capitalism, there's no ethical consumption. So it's like, are we really going to convince enough people in this country to boycott Israel? Maybe. I mean, the best way to do stuff is to threaten their capital. But also in the Bible, and 70% of this country is Christian, it says you must always stand by Israel. So it's like, how are we going to convince those people to boycott Israel? I don't know. It's interesting. It's something to think about, though. And I think politicians on the left, like Bernie, should come out in favor of it, honestly. They're so nervous they're going to be smeared as racist or xenophobic for it. They're going to, or anti-Semitic, you know? That's the main thing. Anytime you're like, hey, maybe we should stand up for Palestinian rights. Like, you anti-Semite, why do you hate Jewish people? Like, if Palestine was doing this to the Jewish people, of course we'd be saying the same thing, you know? We care about people. We don't care about your religion.
I just figure, close with a quote that agrees with that I think is really good. This was MLK from the letter from Birmingham jail, 1963, and the quote was, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate The Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than justice. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will.
Oof.
So, I mean, that just kind of goes with the struggle that I guess me and Eddie have been feeling a lot of people telling us to vote for Biden and calling us Trump supporters for not wanting to vote for Biden. It's like, I don't know. Sometimes I find it easy to relate to the Trump supporters than the Biden supporters that just, I feel like they make more sense in a way. The Biden supporters that say they're all for social justice and all this stuff, but couldn't tell you a single reason to actually vote for Joe Biden. They're more of a cancer to this country, in my opinion.
Thank you guys for watching our video. We're going to keep doing these, just ranting. I think next time we're going to talk about North Korea and the DPRK. You know, touchy subject there. Comment, like, subscribe, share.
Is there anything else you can do?
I don't think so. You can turn on the notifications, the bell. Yeah, I have notifications.
Smash that notification button.
Smash that motherfucking like button. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.